Thanks everybody for the invitation. Safety is the most important issue for our industry. Leading safety and keeping our people safe makes us all humble. And it's really inspiring to see so many people here today working on this topic. I'll try and talk about Shell's approach and about the critical role of leadership in this task. I've led different parts of Shell's operation in the North Sea since 1999, from the aging and enormous Brent facilities through to the brand new field developments at Ormen Lange in Norway. I recall landing in a helicopter on Cormorant Alpha as a newly appointed asset manager and thinking, wow, Shell have made me responsible for this. And then thinking, oh my God, I am responsible for this and for these people. I took over the Brent field in 2003, just 3 weeks after 2 men had died in an accident on Brent Bravo. And I know from personal experience what it does to an organization and to its people when we get things wrong. Brent was run by capable people with the best of intentions at all levels, just like everybody here. Today in Shell, we continue to challenge ourselves extensively around how we as leaders behave, what questions we ask, the expectations we set, so that we can deliver performance. We have learned a lot. There's a lot to learn. It's very, very challenging to run the offshore oil and gas business without injury or loss. And Shell is far from satisfied. And I will not pretend here that Shell has any or all of the answers. But what we are clear on is that the goal is zero. And as one of my platform managers pointed out to me, every day starts with zero. Our job is to make sure it finishes that way. And that's extremely helpful after an incident. Yesterday, something went wrong. The past we cannot change. What we can and must do is learn from it. And we must do that out of respect for those whose lives have been damaged or impacted. But today can be a zero day, and so can tomorrow. My platform manager challenged me like he challenged personally everybody else who arrived on his platform to make sure that I work safely today, that I understand what's expected of me, that I inquire if I do not, and that I assess the risks, and that I'm alert to any changes, and that I look out for the people around me. So I'll just show a disclaimer slide, and I will show you what I will try and touch on in the next few minutes. And what I'll start by doing is looking at some numbers. This is a picture of our upstream international Europe business. So that's Shell's business essentially in the UK, the Netherlands, and Norway. Using the lagging key performance indicators measured by lost time incident frequency in red, or a total recordable case frequency in blue. We think personal and behavioral safety are key to reducing the amount of injuries we have and in our drive to achieve coal zero. So we also track days since the last lost time incident or recordable case. And very tellingly, days since the last time we recorded an incident which could have led to a fatality, a potential loss of life. To really deal with any potential for complacency, when we look at a trend that improves, we need to engender a sense of chronic unease. So let me tell you that the last incident in our European business where we could have killed somebody was 13 days ago on a platform when a man suffered an electrical shock whilst together with another worker, they were operating a lift on one of the platforms. And others during 2010 included a nitrogen bottle which fell out of a rack while being loaded onto a boat with people in the vicinity. A tractor on a land location collided with 2 men. While launching a daughter craft, the rigging failed under tension and a steel pulley hit the head of a crew member. And a drum of methanol was ruptured by well pressure. And every one of those incidents could have killed somebody. And our job is to make sure it doesn't. We also track the days since the last so-called loss of primary containment at a certain level of risk, i.e., when did we last have a significant leak, as a kind of process safety lagging measure. And what you see there is the data at the end of 2010, looking at the most recent and the best that we've achieved. We also, asset integrity or process safety is difficult to measure meaningfully. I can show you a couple of measures here around spills and loss of containment. And we also track maintenance compliance, and more of that later, and indicators like following up from audits, or the alarm rate per hour per console, to be very concretely helping us to ask questions like, is the control room operator able to react to the unexpected? Or is he overloaded or overwhelmed with spurious or unimportant alarms on a regular basis? But all these numbers are only that. We try and use them to provoke curiosity, to guide our questions, and to find insights. Now, before I show the next slide, I want to say that safety is not an area for competition between companies or between countries or between industries. It has to be about sharing and learning so that everybody can go home safe every day wherever they are. But sometimes benchmarking can be useful in creating or reinforcing a case for action. So now I'm going to show some industry statistics by country. Michael mentioned that OGP has a very solid database on personal injuries. So this is a picture of lost time incident frequency per million man-hours worked. Data by country collected on a similar basis for Europe. In purple, the purple square, you can see the regional average in 2009, the most recent year for which figure is available. Something over 1 lost time incident per million man-hours. A similar value to what I showed you a moment ago for our Shell operations in Europe. The first thing you may notice is a very high number for Sweden. In Sweden, there are a handful of employees in upstream, and one unfortunately suffered an injury. But then what can we see for 2009? What we can see is that a person working in Denmark in the offshore oil and gas industry is around twice as likely to be hurt as a person working in Norway or the Netherlands or the UK. Say what you like about the accuracy of the data or differences in the thoroughness of reporting. Nobody I meet and talk to about this thinks that that is what we want here in Denmark. And I notice real focus and redoubled efforts, including this conference, to make the necessary changes. Before I move off these kind of figures and indicators, and remembering that this lost time incident frequency is, of course, only one lens, it's worth a reminder of how Europe looks in the global picture. Europe is the worst performing continent in terms of taking care of our people, looked at through the lens of LTIs. Here you see that the global average is around 0.5 per million man-hours, and in Europe it's more than twice that. Now, there are lots of questions about how comparable is the data, about differences in reporting culture. But in Shell, we can look at some of our own examples, countries where we operate and where we know. And I can mention Qatar. Like many other companies represented here today, we have a major activity in Qatar where we can achieve performance very significantly better than we have managed in Europe up until now. At the Pearl gas to liquids construction site, there were over 50,000 people working at any one time on site. And that team delivered 50 million man-hours, incident and injury-free. And I could also mention a 40 million man-hour incident-free record at our Gabaran Ubie project in Nigeria. So these examples show us that zero is possible. So what are we doing in Shell to sustain the momentum for improvement and to focus on meeting goal zero every day, everywhere? And we will not be satisfied until we do. So firstly, golden rules. The golden rules are underlying principles informing how we act. You and I comply, intervene, and respect. You and I comply with laws, procedures, and standards. You and I intervene in unsafe or non-compliant situations. You and I respect our neighbors. We have safety days, once each year, now for the 4th year, on all Shell sites across the world in all countries. We take time out. We take time out with staff and contractors to think about what it means to do the right thing. Doing the right thing isn't just about following the rules. It's about each of us making conscious choices about safety. It's making sure we take the time to reflect and to learn. When each of us does the right thing, we move closer to goal 0. And then I'd like to mention our life-saving rules. We in Shell are not short of rules. But we looked at the fatalities that were happening across our business, and we established what people were doing when they lost their lives. We identified rules which, if followed, would have prevented those accidents. And more to the point, we also asked our contractors, some of whom work safer with other operators than with us. And they said, you Shell leaders do not show you are serious about safety. You talk, but you do not act. So we now have these 12 rules that we really care about. We care about them so much that we say, if you choose not to follow any one of these rules on one of our sites, you choose not to work for Shell. And we have followed that up. We have done what we said. And we have seen a significant improvement in the safety across our operations on a worldwide basis. Several of the rules focus on issues of process safety and asset integrity, looking at isolations, at gas testing, at work permits, to help us, for example, to make sure that the work permit system is operating as intended. Asset integrity-related incidents do not take place often, but when they do, they can be catastrophic and lead to major loss of life and asset damage, as we've been hearing today. It's important to learn the lessons from historical incidents and apply these learnings to ensure no repeat. So we have a vision for asset integrity. The key to this vision is, and we know it. Our assets are safe, and we know it. So how do we get to that point? We have a series of controls and barriers to minimize the likelihood that a hazard becomes an accident, and that if it nonetheless does happen, that we are prepared to mitigate the consequences. And we divide integrity, if you like, into 3 pieces. Design integrity, where we say we design so that the residual risk is as low as reasonably practicable, that we've identified and documented the process safety risks, that we've applied technical standards, that we have critical equipment documentation, that we properly describe the operating and integrity envelopes and hand them over after construction. We have a technical integrity piece where examples are around assessing and fixing the integrity-dependent elements, maintaining and testing the barriers in the hardware, properly planning and preparing and executing the work on the schedules as required, assuring integrity through peer reviews and audits, and managing change using an appropriate framework of technical authorities. We also need to satisfy ourselves that our operating procedures are supporting us to operate within limits, that we manage alarms, that the permit to work system operates, that handovers are appropriately managed, and that critical documents and drawings are updated and available, and assuring ourselves that we have the right competent people all the time. Because incidents of asset integrity do not happen very often, it's really very important that we learn from historical incidents and apply the lessons learned. So we have this series of retrospective standards which are mandated across our operations to ensure that those learnings are not only recognized, but changes are implemented. And as an example, a list of so-called process safety basic requirements. And just the number 1 around safe siting of occupied portable buildings It comes directly from the Texas City learnings, where portable buildings were inappropriately located on the site in Texas. And that is now a mandated requirement, retrospectively implemented across all of our operations worldwide. And others on this list came from the Buntsville incident near London some years ago. And this list will grow as we try to make sure that both the past and the future recognize what's going on. We also have a project underway in Europe to ensure we understand the current operating envelope and how we stay within it sustainably. So this is all around the management of change in the equipment or in its condition, in the production itself, perhaps no longer oil, but now oil, water, gas, sand at different temperatures, pressures, and velocities. Also changes in team composition and competence and shift cycles, and to allow us to assure all aspects that we stay within the limits. Building off the safety case from the HSE management system, we identify safety critical elements, assess planned maintenance, and try and get the visibility to properly address the link between maintenance and integrity. We can also consider a system we call FSR, Facility Status Review, which is a snapshot used to monitor our compliance with preventative maintenance of the safety critical elements in our assets. It provides a clear and transparent status at any one time and flags any potential areas of exposure. And it allows drill down, so you can look at a Europe level or at a module level and assess the picture. You can look at a dashboard which shows the maintenance KPIs, looking at scheduled compliance, at the ratio between preventative and corrective activities. Looks at how well we are scheduling the work that we require. We can look at monitoring compliance on a technical integrity basis. What overrides do we have? What overrides to safeguarding? How are they changing? Taking a look at the cumulative risk. Now, this is a structured approach, and it can allow us to do the basics like prioritizing maintenance resource between platforms and or bed space relative to other activities when we start to evaluate the cumulative risk. For example, when you have a well integrity risk and a facilities risk, how do you prioritize your resource, your activities, your plans? But really, what is the importance of all these systems? It is all in what we as managers do with them. How do we discuss the red flags? What questions do we ask around persistent failure to improve? Do we ask why? Do we dig deep enough? How readily do we accept the answer we would like to hear? For many years, I would go around on platforms asking people, are you able to stop work? Are you able to intervene? You as a subcontractor, can you intervene with a Shell staff? And people always said yes, because they knew that was the right answer. A much better question is, when did somebody last stop work around here? Have you ever stopped work? What did you learn from the last incident when work was stopped? What was the reaction of leadership? How do we know what we think we know? It was Huckleberry Finn who said, "It ain't what I know that gets me into trouble, it's what I know that ain't so." What can we do to support dilemmas around conflicting priorities? What do I as a manager do when I hear bad news on safety or integrity? How can I tell if what I do builds a learning culture or a blame culture? What signals are sent from leadership about costs? How do I support my supervisors and leaders? These questions create a sense of chronic unease. The goal here is not about all green lights on one of these charts. The goal is to have an accurate reflection of what is going on, to enable us to deal with the world as it is, not the world as we would like it to be, or the world as it is supposed to be, but the world as it is. The challenge for leadership is to communicate that. There are many ways to approach the problem, and many solutions have been tried. Good safety and good integrity are the outcome of a well-run business. We as leaders must set our people up for that kind of success. Thank you for your attention.